When my grandma hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for bringing the chocolate cake again last month," my blood turned to ice. I hadn't been there last month. I hadn't brought any cake. And the way my cousin David suddenly found his shoes fascinating, while my mother's face turned the color of a ripe tomato, told me everything I needed to know about the lie that was about to destroy our family. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, and I thought I knew my family. I live 3 hours away in Chicago, working as a marketing manager, and I visit Grandma Margaret every few weeks when I can manage it. She's 78, has been battling dementia for 2 years, and lives in the same house where she raised 4 children, including my mother, Linda. Before I dive deeper into how this moment shattered everything I believed about my family, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, give this video a thumbs up, and if you're new here, subscribe to hear more stories about family secrets that change everything. Now, let me take you back to that Sunday afternoon that started like any other visit, but ended with me questioning everything. I had driven down from Chicago that morning, carrying her favorite lavender soap and a box of her beloved shortbread cookies from the bakery she used to frequent. The October air was crisp, and the maple tree in her front yard was showing off its autumn colors. Everything seemed perfectly normal as I rang the doorbell. "Sarah, sweetheart." Grandma Margaret opened the door with that warm smile that had comforted me through scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore the blue cardigan I'd given her last Christmas. For a moment, she looked exactly like the sharp, witty woman who had taught me to play chess and bake apple pie. But then came those words that would haunt me. "Thank you for bringing the chocolate cake again last month." I stood there, frozen, still holding the bakery box. My mind raced. Last month? I had been swamped with a product launch at work. I specifically remembered calling to cancel my visit and promising to come the following weekend instead. There was no cake. There was no visit. "Grandma," I said carefully, "I wasn't here last month, remember? I called you and Mom to explain I couldn't make it because of work." The confusion that flickered across her face was brief, but I caught it. Then she smiled again, patting my cheek. "Oh, of course you were here, dear. We sat in the kitchen, and you told me all about that new project at your job. The cake was delicious." That's when I noticed my cousin David, who had been helping fix a loose floorboard, suddenly became very interested in organizing his tools. My mother, who had been setting the table for lunch, was now standing statue still by the kitchen doorway, her face flushed red. "Mom?" I turned to her, my voice carrying a warning. "Can we talk for a minute?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to tick louder. David cleared his throat and mumbled something about needing to check something in his car. My mother's eyes darted between me and Grandma Margaret, who was now humming softly as she arranged the flowers I'd brought in a vase. That's when I realized my family had been lying to my grandmother. But what I was about to discover was so much worse than a simple white lie about missed visits. "Kitchen. Now." The words came out sharper than I intended, but the betrayal burning in my chest made diplomacy impossible. My mother followed me into the familiar yellow kitchen where Grandma had taught 3 generations of our family to cook. The same kitchen where, apparently, I had supposedly shared cake and conversation just 4 weeks ago while I was actually pulling all-nighters in my Chicago office. "Sarah, let me explain," Mom started, but I cut her off. "Explain what? That you've been lying to Grandma about my visits? That you're making her believe things that never happened?" My voice was rising, and I forced myself to lower it. Grandma was in the next room, and the last thing I wanted was to upset her further. Mom sank into one of the wooden chairs, suddenly looking every one of her 58 years. "It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're manipulating an elderly woman with dementia." The back door opened, and David walked in, clearly having abandoned his excuse about the car. His guilty expression told me he was neck-deep in whatever this was. "We didn't have a choice," David said, running his hand through his dark hair. "Do you know what it does to her when she thinks everyone's forgotten about her?" "Forgotten about her? I visit every few weeks. I call twice a week. But she doesn't remember the calls," Mom said quietly. "And sometimes she doesn't remember the visits either. Last month, after you canceled, she spent 3 days asking everyone where you were. She was convinced something terrible had happened to you." I stared at them both. "So you decided to lie instead?" "We decided to give her peace," David said defensively. Look, Sarah, you don't see her every day like we do. You don't see her panic when she can't remember if you're safe, if you still love her, if you're ever coming back." My mother nodded, tears forming in her eyes. The doctor said that with dementia, sometimes it's kinder to go along with what brings them comfort rather than constantly correcting them. It causes less anxiety. "But you didn't just go along with it," I said, the pieces clicking together. "You actively created a false memory. You told her I brought a cake. You gave her specific details about a conversation that never happened." The silence stretched between us. Finally, Mom spoke. "David brought the cake. We said it was from you. And the conversation she remembers having with me?" David shifted uncomfortably. "I may have mentioned some things about your job, things Mom told me from your phone calls. Grandma just filled in the rest." I felt sick. "How long has this been going on?" "Sarah, how long?" Mom looked at David, and something passed between them. A look that suggested this rabbit hole went deeper than missed visits and phantom cakes. "About 6 months, Mom admitted. But it's not just about visits. It's about other things, too." "What other things?" Before either could answer, Grandma's voice drifted in from the living room. "Sarah, dear, are you staying for dinner? I made your favorite pot roast, just like last time." I hadn't eaten pot roast at Grandma's house in over a year. The last time she'd made it, she'd forgotten about it in the oven and nearly started a fire. "Who's been making the pot roast, Mom?" The look on her face told me everything. This wasn't just about protecting Grandma's feelings. This was about something much bigger, something that made my stomach churn with a growing sense of dread. "We need to talk about why this really started," David said grimly. "Because it wasn't just about missed visits, Sarah. It was about what Grandma overheard us discussing that night in August. The August night David mentioned hit me like a physical blow. That was when the family had gathered to discuss Grandma's future, whether she could continue living alone, whether we needed to consider assisted living, and yes, the uncomfortable topic of her finances and what would happen to the house. She heard us," I said, the realization making my knees weak. "She heard us talking about moving her." Mom nodded miserably. "She was supposed to be sleeping. We thought the medication would keep her out for the night. But she came downstairs for water and heard everything." I remembered that night. I had driven down specifically for that family meeting. We'd all been there: Mom, David, my Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim. We'd spread Grandma's medical reports and financial documents across her own dining room table like we were planning a business merger instead of discussing a woman's life. "What exactly did she hear?" "Everything," David said. "About the memory care facility Carol found. About how the house would need to be sold to pay for it. About how we didn't think she could live independently much longer." I closed my eyes, remembering Grandma's face the next morning. She'd been quieter than usual, almost withdrawn. I'd attributed it to the dementia, but now, "She's been pretending," I whispered. "Some of the confusion, some of the memory loss. She's been playing it up." "We think so," Mom confirmed. "Dr. Peterson says that's not uncommon. Patients sometimes exaggerate symptoms when they're afraid of losing their independence." The kitchen door swung open, and Grandma Margaret walked in, moving with a purposefulness I hadn't seen in months. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been all afternoon. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation," she said, and her voice was steady, sharp. This was the grandmother I remembered from childhood, the one who never missed a detail and could see through any lie. We all froze. David's mouth actually fell open. Grandma pulled out her usual chair and sat down with dignity. "I may have dementia, but I'm not stupid, and I'm not deaf." She looked directly at me. "You weren't here last month, Sarah. I know that. But when your mother and David told me you had been, I went along with it because I was curious to see how far this little charade would go." My mother's face had gone white. "Mom, we were just trying to lie to me, to make decisions about my life without including me, to treat me like a child who can't handle the truth." Grandma's voice was firm, but not angry. "I heard everything that night in August, every word about nursing homes and selling my house and how difficult I've become. The shame burning in my chest was overwhelming. Grandma, we were trying to figure out how to keep you safe. By lying to me? By creating fake visits and pretending I'm more confused than I am?" She shook her head. "I've been testing you all. Every time you went along with one of my confused moments, every time you nodded when I mentioned something that never happened, you failed the test." David found his voice. We were following the doctor's advice. Dr. Peterson told you to humor my delusions, not create new ones. Grandma's smile was sad but knowing. Did you really think I wouldn't notice that the pot roast I supposedly made last week was from Murphy's Deli downtown? I've been buying food from Murphy's for 40 years, dear. I know what their container lids look like. The room was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about the past 6 months was crumbling. There's something else, Grandma continued, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Something you all don't know. Something I've been keeping from you while you've been keeping things from me. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Medical letterhead. Recent date. I've been seeing a specialist in the city. Someone I found on my own. Someone who doesn't think I'm just a confused old lady. Her eyes met each of ours. The diagnosis you all think you're protecting me from? It might be wrong. The paper trembled in her hands as she set it on the table. But what hurts more than any disease is discovering that my own family thinks so little of me that they'd rather lie than trust me with the truth about my own life. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of my mother's quiet crying. But Grandma wasn't finished. The look in her eyes told me the biggest revelation was yet to come. The medical report lay on the table between us like a bomb waiting to explode. I could see the letterhead clearly now. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, neurological specialist, City Medical Center. The date was from 3 weeks ago. What does it say? I whispered. Grandma Margaret's fingers smoothed the paper carefully. It says that what everyone assumed was advancing dementia might actually be a combination of medication interactions and severe depression. It says that with proper treatment, much of my cognitive function could return. The words hit the room like a physical force. Mom's crying stopped abruptly. David's face went from guilty to shocked to something that looked almost like fear. But that's wonderful news, I stammered. Why didn't you tell us? Because, Grandma said, her voice gaining strength, I needed to understand why my family was so eager to believe I was losing my mind. Why you were all so quick to make plans for my life without me. She stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden she'd tended for 50 years. I started paying attention, really paying attention, and what I discovered broke my heart. Grandma, Mom started, but Grandma held up her hand. Linda, when did you start having financial problems? The question came out of nowhere, but Mom's face immediately flushed red again. I don't know what you mean. The medical bills from your surgery last year. The ones you thought I didn't know about because David handles my mail now. Grandma turned back to face us. The second mortgage you took out on your house. The credit card debt. My mother looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. And David, Grandma continued, her gaze shifting to my cousin. When exactly were you planning to tell me about the business loan you took out using my house as collateral? The silence was deafening. I stared at David, my childhood playmate, the cousin I'd trusted with family secrets since we were kids. You did what? It wasn't supposed to be permanent, David said desperately. The construction business hit a rough patch after that storm last spring. I just needed something to tide me over until the insurance claims came through. Using Grandma's house? I have power of attorney for financial matters, he said defensively. It was all legal. Legal, Grandma repeated, her voice bitter. Legal, but not honest. Not discussed with me. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. The nursing home discussions, I said slowly. They weren't about what was best for Grandma. They were about accessing her money. That's not, Mom started. Isn't it? I was on my feet now, the betrayal burning through me like acid. If Grandma's declared incompetent, if she's moved to a facility, David keeps power of attorney, the house gets sold, the debts get paid, and everyone wins except the woman who built this family. Sarah, you don't understand the pressure we've been under, David said. The medical bills, the business failing. So you decided to gaslight an elderly woman with dementia? We thought she really was getting worse, Mom cried. The doctor said to humor her delusions, not create them, Grandma interrupted. But it was convenient, wasn't it? Every time I seemed confused, it justified your plans a little more. She walked back to the table and picked up the medical report. I've been seeing Dr. Hartwell for 2 months. I take the bus to the city every other week. I pay for the visits myself with money I've been hiding in my sewing box, money you all assumed I was too confused to manage. You've been taking the bus alone? I was horrified. Grandma, that's not safe. According to Dr. Hartwell, I'm perfectly capable of taking the bus, My cognitive tests show mild impairment, not severe dementia. The confusion, the memory problems, they were largely caused by the wrong medications and the isolation I felt when my family started treating me like a child. She sat back down, and for the first time since this conversation started, she looked tired, old, hurt. I played along with your lies because I was buying time to get a proper diagnosis, time to understand what was really happening to my family, time to figure out how to protect myself. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Finally, I found my voice. What happens now? Grandma Margaret looked at each of us, her children and grandchildren, who had betrayed her trust in the name of love and desperation. Now, she said quietly, we decide whether this family can survive the truth. 3 months have passed since that devastating Sunday afternoon, and I'm sitting in Grandma Margaret's kitchen again. But everything is different now. The yellow walls are the same. The wooden table bears the same coffee ring stains from decades of family meals. But the people around it have changed. We've all changed. Mom is here, but she looks older, more fragile. The financial stress that drove her to desperate measures hasn't disappeared, but she's dealing with it honestly now. She's seeing a financial counselor and working 2 part-time jobs to tackle her medical debt. It's hard, but she says the relief of not carrying secrets anymore makes it bearable. David isn't here. He's working in the next county, trying to rebuild his construction business and pay back the loan he took against Grandma's house. Our relationship is still strained. Trust, once broken, doesn't repair quickly. But last week he sent a letter apologizing again and included a payment toward what he owes. It's a start. Grandma Margaret is thriving. Dr. Hartwell's treatment plan has been remarkable. With the right medications and cognitive therapy, the woman I thought I was losing has returned with a vengeance. She's sharper now than she's been in 2 years, and she's fiercely protective of her independence. I've made some decisions, she announced last month. I'm staying in this house as long as I'm able. I've hired a part-time caregiver for the days when I need help, and I've updated my will to reflect my wishes clearly. She looked directly at me when she said the next part. I'm also giving each of my children and grandchildren a copy of my medical records and financial situation. No more secrets. No more assumptions about what I can or cannot handle. The caregiver, Elena, comes 3 days a week. She's a retired nurse in her 60s who treats Grandma like an adult, not a patient. They've become friends, and I often arrive to find them planning elaborate garden projects or discussing the books they're reading together. But the biggest change is in how we communicate now. The lies, even the well-intentioned ones, nearly destroyed us. In their place, we've built something harder but stronger. Radical honesty. Sarah, Grandma said during my visit last weekend, I need you to know that some days I do still get confused. The dementia isn't completely gone. It may never be. But I need you to promise me that you'll never lie to me about it. I promise, I said, and I meant it. And I need you to promise that if the day comes when I really can't live alone safely, you'll tell me the truth about that too. That promise was harder to make, but I made it anyway. We've also started having monthly family meetings, real meetings, where Grandma has a voice in decisions about her life. We discuss her medical care, her finances, her wishes for the future. It's not always easy. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but it's honest. I've learned that love isn't about protecting people from difficult realities. It's about trusting them enough to face those realities together. The lies we told Grandma weren't just about her dementia. They were about our own fears of loss, of difficult conversations, of admitting that we didn't have all the answers. Last Sunday, as I was getting ready to drive back to Chicago, Grandma walked me to my car. The maple tree in her front yard was showing its autumn colors again, exactly 1 year after the afternoon that changed everything. I want to thank you, she said, hugging me goodbye. For a moment, my heart stopped. For what? She smiled, and it was the mischievous smile I remembered from childhood. For not bringing any cake, for not pretending everything was fine when it wasn't, for choosing truth over comfort. As I drove away, I thought about the family we used to be and the family we're becoming. We're smaller now. Some relationships may never fully heal. We're more cautious with each other, still learning to trust again. But we're real. And sometimes, being real is more valuable than being comfortable. If you're watching this and dealing with family members who have dementia or other challenges, I want you to know that honesty doesn't mean being cruel. It means respecting people enough to include them in their own lives, even when those lives are changing. It means having difficult conversations instead of making assumptions. Thanks for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real stories about family, truth, and the courage it takes to choose what's right over what's easy. And remember, the people we love deserve our honesty, even when the truth is hard to bear. My grandmother taught me that dignity isn't about protecting people from reality. It's about facing reality together with love, respect, and the truth.